So this is my memorable speech. So I'm going to tell you about a story of a time that changed my life forever. I was 11 years old and had grown up with a bipolar mother, whom of which we did not know was bipolar. To give you a bit of a background, my birth mother had a very rough upbringing. She was abused as a child very severely. My grandmother made the movie Mommy Dearest look like a piece of cake. So um, my birth mother ran away at 16, had a kid, and made her way across the country to start over just to get away from her mom. I have an older brother who I haven't seen since I was 6 years old, when he went into foster care. And that's pretty much when my life changed forever. Um, my mother didn't take it very well. Um, she took her anger and frustration out on me. A lot of resentment built up. The fact that she used having kids as an outlet to get away from her mother. I lived my life every day in fear because my mother would verbally and physically abuse me for hours and hours, like every single day that I would come home. I would come from school and she would have me pinned in a corner until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. That went on for years, from the age of about 6 until 11, when everything changed. Our neighbors, they would call the cops on my mom almost daily. And they did absolutely nothing because she never left any physical marks on me. And you can't really prove verbal abuse other than, neighbors overheard her screaming at me and things like that. One day, shortly after I had turned 11, I think it was right after summer, so we had just went back to school. My mom began screaming at me one day after school. And at that point, I was old enough to understand that it wasn't okay. Not necessarily to fight back per se, but that I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, so I didn't understand why it was happening. I picked up the phone, attempted to call one of my friends to either come pick me up or I can go to their house just to kind of get away from it. Every time the cops were at our house, they always, advised me to find somewhere to go to let my mom cool off. That was basically their solution for everything. As I grabbed the phone, this was about 15, 20 years ago, so it had the cord on it and everything. My mom freaked out. She apparently thought I was calling the cops on her. She tried to get the phone away from me. With that, she kind of got tangled up in the cord, tripped on it a little bit, and it left like a little light mark on her leg. And so she was, freaking out, thought I was calling the cops on her. So the cops showed up anyways because our neighbors had called again. And she apparently decided to play the victim, said that I tried to basically beat her up, that I attempted to trip her, strangle her with the phone cord. And the cops were very, familiar with our situation, but yet they believed her, and I was arrested for assault and battery with a weapon at the age of 11. So I went to juvenile hall. I awaited trial. My mother continuously did not show up to my court dates. So when you go to juvenile hall, instead of going into like the actual detention center, you stay in a holding cell, which is pretty much a metal bench and a toilet in a room. People coming in and out the entire day for fingerprinting and things like that. So I stayed in there for about 3.5 weeks. Every day they would transfer me over to the courthouse. I would wait there all day in another metal holding tank. She wouldn't show up, so they transferred me back and so on. So one day she finally decided to show up. She tried to convince the judge that I was completely out of control. She couldn't handle me. Basically threw her hands up in the air and said that she didn't want me anymore. So she signed over her rights and I became a ward of the state. And as bad as this sounds, this is probably one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. I ended up spending a little over a year in juvenile hall, appealing my charges. I finally had a judge who had sat down, listened to everything, pulled the reports from the county that I lived in, and could clearly see, for almost 6 years, the continuous times that they had shown up at my house and nothing had happened. they finally decided to drop my charges to simple assault, which then made me eligible at the age of 12 to go into some sort of a group home or foster home, etc. I was lucky enough to be accepted into a foster home, about 45 minutes where I had grown up, so I had to switch schools. I had already missed, my entire 8th grade year, going into high school with, not really being prepared for it. I spent some time in the group home. It was definitely interesting. I was in there with girls who had been in and out of juvenile hall their entire life. Some of them were in juvenile detention centers for mental disorders. For me, I had never been in trouble. I think I ditched school like maybe once by that time. And it was usually just because I was up all night dealing with my mom screaming at me, so I didn't have my homework and I didn't want to face my teachers and, go through all the questioning and things like that. And so once I went into the group home, I was given a big brother, big sister. My big sister actually introduced me, who then turned into be my foster parents. They got their license and everything just to take me in. They had never been foster parents and things like that before. And really just showed me a completely different side of life. She's a very successful real estate agent. He was an occupational therapist. And as soon as I began living with them, I was 14 and a half. I got a job, I saved up, and really just taught me how to be an adult. Granted, mentally I had been an adult for a long time, growing up without a mom really there for you. But she kind of showed me the other side, how to support myself financially, how to budget books and things like that. I ended up getting emancipated at the age of 16, moved out on my own, been on my own ever since. I've tried to reconcile with my mother. Things really just didn't work out. She was finally diagnosed bipolar. They forced her to go into therapy and things like that. She continuously decided to just not go. She wouldn't take the medication, things like that. And when I found out that I was pregnant with my son, that was the day that I legitimately just cut her off completely. Haven't seen, spoken, or heard of her since then. And I really just didn't want to have, my son growing up with that uncertainty and never really knowing what to expect from that. I don't think it's really fair for a child to go through that. So every day, I'm very, very thankful for everything that I went through. I definitely wouldn't be the person that I am today without it. And it's really molded me to be, just a decent human being and really just, have a different aspect on life. And I've never, really played the victim. I've just kind of, it's very just matter of fact. It's like, yeah, that did happen, and a lot of people are like, oh my God, that's so horrible. And, I'm thankful every single day. And if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't change a thing. Thank you.